Have you ever been surrounded by people and still felt completely alone? You're laughing, talking, responding normally. Maybe you even look happy from the outside. But inside, there's nothing, no connection, no excitement, no emotional warmth, just emptiness. And the strange part is, you don't always understand why. Sometimes you leave social situations feeling more drained than before. Sometimes you sit in a room full of people and feel emotionally disconnected from everyone around you, like there's an invisible wall between you and the rest of the world. You can hear people, you can respond to them, but you can't fully feel them anymore. If this happens often, you may think something is wrong with you. But what if that emptiness isn't random? What if your mind created it for a reason? Because in psychology, emotional numbness is rarely meaningless. Sometimes it's protection. Today, we're breaking down the dark psychology behind why some people feel empty around others, what causes emotional disconnection, and why your brain may be shutting feelings down without you realizing it. Your brain can disconnect to protect you. Most people think emotions are automatic, but they're not. Your brain constantly decides how much emotion is safe to feel, and sometimes it lowers emotional intensity on purpose. Why? Because emotions can be overwhelming, painful, unpredictable. If someone experiences enough stress, disappointment, rejection, betrayal, or emotional exhaustion, the brain may slowly begin disconnecting from emotional intensity itself, not because it wants to hurt you, but because it wants to protect you from overload. Psychologists sometimes call this emotional blunting. The nervous system reduces emotional response to avoid further stress. The problem is, when the brain numbs pain, it often numbs connection too. So eventually, even positive social interactions start feeling distant, flat, empty. You can be social and still feel alone. One of the strangest parts of emotional emptiness is that it can happen around anyone. Friends, family, partners, coworkers, even people you genuinely care about. Because loneliness is not always about physical isolation. It's about emotional disconnection. Someone can sit beside you every day and still feel emotionally unreachable. This is why many people become experts at pretending. They smile automatically, respond automatically, act engaged automatically, but internally, they feel detached from the interaction itself, almost like they're watching themselves perform social behavior instead of actually experiencing it. Over time, this becomes exhausting because pretending connection drains energy. Real connection creates energy. Emotional exhaustion changes the brain. When people go through long periods of stress, their nervous system can become chronically overloaded, and overloaded systems stop functioning normally. Think about what happens when a phone overheats. It slows down, shuts down functions, conserves energy. The human brain does something similar. If your emotional system stays overwhelmed long enough, your brain may begin suppressing emotional depth to survive. This is why some people stop feeling excitement, stop feeling joy, stop feeling emotionally present. Their nervous system isn't relaxed enough to fully open emotionally anymore. Instead, it stays guarded, tired, defensive, and when your nervous system enters survival mode, connection becomes harder because survival and emotional openness rarely happen at the same time. You may have learned to hide emotion early. Many emotionally disconnected people learned something dangerous very early in life. Showing emotion was unsafe. Maybe vulnerability was ignored, mocked, punished, used against you. Or maybe your emotions simply weren't understood. So your brain adapted. Instead of expressing deeply, it learned to suppress, to stay quiet, to stay emotionally controlled, to avoid emotional exposure. At first, this adaptation helps. It prevents embarrassment, conflict, rejection, but years later, that same emotional defense can become automatic. Even around safe people, your brain no longer asks, is it safe to open emotionally? It assumes emotional distance is normal. The modern world makes it worse. There's another reason emotional emptiness is becoming more common. Modern life constantly overstimulates the brain, while emotionally underfeeding it. You receive endless information, messages, notifications, content, short bursts of dopamine, but very little deep emotional presence. People are more connected digitally than ever before, yet emotionally disconnected more than ever. Many interactions today feel fast, shallow, and performative, and the brain notices this. Real emotional connection requires attention, presence, trust, and emotional safety. But constant stimulation weakens emotional depth. Over time, people begin feeling emotionally numb without understanding why. Not because they're cold, but because their nervous system is overloaded. Some people feel too much, so they shut down. Ironically, many emotionally numb people are actually highly sensitive internally. They don't feel too little. They feel too much. They absorb tension quickly, notice emotional shifts immediately, overthink interactions deeply, carry emotional energy longer than most people, and eventually the brain becomes exhausted. So instead of staying emotionally open, it starts reducing intensity. This creates emotional detachment, a psychological dimming effect. The person still experiences emotion underneath, but access to it becomes weaker. This is why emotionally numb people often say strange things like, I know I should care more. I know I love people. I just can't feel it fully. The emotion may still exist, but the nervous system has disconnected from experiencing it clearly. Why social situations become draining. When someone feels emotionally disconnected. Social interaction often becomes performance instead of connection, and performance consumes energy. You start monitoring yourself constantly. How do I sound? Am I responding correctly? Do I seem normal enough? Do I look interested? This creates internal pressure. Instead of relaxing socially, your brain stays in evaluation mode, and evaluation mode is mentally exhausting. That's why some people feel relief the moment they're finally alone. Not because they hate people, but because their nervous system can finally stop performing. Emotional numbness can become addictive. This part surprises many people. After enough time, emotional distance can actually start feeling safer than connection. Why? Because connection creates vulnerability, and vulnerability creates risk. When you emotionally open yourself to someone, you also open yourself to disappointment, loss, rejection, abandonment, pain. So emotional numbness begins feeling protective, predictable, controlled. Your brain may unconsciously prefer emptiness over emotional risk because emptiness feels safer than being hurt again. The danger is that over time, people stop trying to reconnect emotionally at all. They slowly normalize emptiness until they can barely remember what emotional closeness felt like. The difference between peace and emptiness. This is important. Peace and emptiness are not the same thing. Peace feels calm, stable, safe. Emptiness feels disconnected, heavy, emotionally absent. Many people confuse emotional numbness with emotional maturity, but shutting emotions off is not healing. Real healing allows emotion without emotional collapse. Real healing creates emotional safety inside the nervous system, not emotional shutdown. How to start feeling again. The solution is not forcing yourself to be more emotional. That usually doesn't work because emotional numbness is often a nervous system issue, not a personality flaw. The first step is reducing chronic stress. The second is rebuilding emotional safety. Slowly, consistently, the brain reconnects emotionally when it no longer feels constantly threatened. And most importantly, stop judging yourself for feeling disconnected. Many people developed emotional numbness as survival adaptation. Your brain may have learned that shutting down emotionally was safer than staying open. That doesn't make you broken. It makes you adapted. But adaptations can change. The nervous system can relearn safety. Connection can return. Emotion can return. And sometimes the first step is simply understanding why the emptiness exists in the first place. Final thought. If you feel empty around people, it may not mean you're cold or incapable of connection or emotionally broken. It may mean your mind has spent too long protecting itself, too long staying guarded, too long surviving instead of fully feeling. And survival mode changes people, but emotional numbness is not always permanent. Sometimes the brain disconnects emotionally because it believes distance equals safety. But eventually, real healing begins when the nervous system realizes you no longer have to protect yourself from every feeling. And when that happens, the emptiness slowly starts disappearing.